everybody for coming today and joining us for this session. First, as is our tradition, let me begin by honoring and acknowledging that we in Edmonton here are on traditional Treaty 6 territory and an important trading center for the Métis Nation. I'm happy to have Richard Houle joining us to share with us the 8 deadly wastes. I was introduced to HLH Chartered Professional Accountants by one of our students who attended a session that Richard delivered out of the Entrepreneurship Center for ATB Financial, and he highly suggested that we bring them in. And so I reached out and just asked, hey, would you? And he said, yes. We're so very lucky to have him today. We're going to ask you to keep your mics muted during the presentation, but please do afterwards unmute, show your face, allow that networking opportunity and ask questions. So over to you, Richard.
Thanks, Cecile. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Cecile, maybe you can give me the thumbs up. Oh, good, you're shaking your head. Okay, perfect, good, we're a go. Okay, well, thanks for having me, everybody. I really appreciate this opportunity. We're gonna aim for about 50 minutes, and then, as Cecile said, we'll leave a good 10 minutes at the end for questions. And I invite all questions. This is a new topic for a lot of people. It might be new to most of you. I haven't seen it being taught in any educational setting. It's typically various companies like Go Productivity, for example, will teach lean, white belt, green belt, yellow belt. But so this is just an introduction to the 8 wastes and to lean. So just a little bit about me. I'm a CPA, originally trained as a CA. I did start off my training at NAIT. I spent 2 years and obtained a business diploma there, and then went on to the U of A afterwards. So my background is very much in public practice, and I basically work with owner-managed businesses to help them create more cash flow and create more profit, in particular by reducing waste. And of course, our firm does the tax planning and everything that goes along with that. But the big piece that we focus on lately has been the lean side of things and waste reduction. So let's dive in. So our goals for today, just a few things we want to accomplish with this session. The first one is we want to define waste and processes. So we really want to understand what waste is, what a process is from a lean perspective. We also want to understand what are the 8 deadly wastes, become familiar with them, and know how to recognize them. We also want to measure what matters. The idea here is that all of these wastes can be measured, and it's just like everything else in life. You'll focus on what you'll measure. So if you don't measure it, you won't focus on it. And the last goal will be to gain the confidence to actually initiate change today. So these concepts that you're learning, we want you to be able to take this and start now. You don't need to dive in any further than what we'll discuss here to get going. You can actually get going on these thoughts and on these concepts in your business and in your personal life too. So we always have to give credit where credit is due. Well, let me rewind a little bit before we talk about this particular book. Everything we're talking about here with lean and the 8 wastes, this really comes from Toyota years and years ago when they developed the Toyota production system. So Toyota, they obviously realized that they had some quality control issues, we'll call it, that they had to address. And so they dove into looking at waste and how to eliminate waste from their business. And that's where all of this stems from. And this fellow, Paul Akers, wrote this book called 2 Second Lean. And so Paul owns a company called FastCap in Washington. And he just dove into these 8 wastes, adopted them, spent time traveling to Japan to learn more about the Toyota production system, as well as to learn from other Japanese companies who've adopted these same concepts. And he implemented them in his business. And this book is a really concise way of explaining what the 8 wastes are. It's a fantastic read. Actually, in our office, it's a must read. When people start working with us, of course, they get their HLH pen, they get their HLH folio. Well, they get a copy of the 2 Second Lean book and they have to read it. It's a great read. highly recommend it. And Paul's concept here is that the reason he calls it 2-second lean is he wanted all of his people to implement a 2-second improvement in what they do every day. The idea being he wanted to set the bar so low that every one of his people could accomplish that. So it's very much not about working harder, working faster. It's not about that. This is about working smarter. Also, I just wanted to mention this Paul Akers and FastCap. If you're on YouTube or you go to their website, they have a ton of videos, just excellent videos about lean, and you can get very granular in terms of very specific waste you're looking at targeting, and there are just hundreds of videos available on his website. So what I'm saying here today is not something that I made up. This is very much built off of Toyota and Paul Akers here. So what is waste? Well, waste, from a lean perspective, is defined as any action or expenditure that your customer is not willing to pay for. This is customer focused. This is client focused. This is not about what you think is valuable. This is about your customer. And everything that you do that your customer is not willing to pay for is non-value added from the customer's eyes. That's the focus here. If you're not sure, ask your customer. Your customer is not going to be disappointed if you ask them what's valuable to them. You want to think about a couple different things. What if, let's say you're a home builder and you are actually framing the houses. Let's say you're at the framing stage. Does it matter that every single 2x4 is 100% straight? You know, your customer might not be willing to pay for that. Maybe you can accept some, as long as the 2x4s are close enough, everything else will get straightened out as the process continues. Versus, let's say you're in some type of nanotechnology field. Yeah, quality is going to be very, very important. Having the highest quality components is probably mandatory. Your customer likely won't accept anything less. So you really have to think about what's important to your customer. Let me throw this out. Oilers. I love going to the Oilers games. I love buying Oilers tickets and having that experience and sharing that with some clients. But for all the other clients that I'm not taking to the games, is that a value added expense to them? I can't mark that up and expect my other customers to pay for the fact that I bought those tickets. May not be value added to those clients that are not actually going to the game with me. Just things to think about. What is a process? A process, a series of actions or steps. The key thing to remember here is everything you do in life and in your business is a process. Everything from brushing your teeth to when you bring your car to your mechanic is fixing your car and he's using a process to fix your vehicle. Designing a website is a process. Everything you do is a process. And these 8 ways really apply to any process. So we really want to point out here that this really isn't just your business. These things apply to everything you do in life, in your personal side as well. And the key point here, the basic tenet, is continuous improvement. And if you make small, continuous improvements to reduce your waste, you'll see a compounding effect and life will just be easier. Your doing business will be easier. It'll be more fun. Even just your personal life. It's nice to just get rid of that waste. It's a nice weight off your shoulders. It just feels great. So I really want to stress that this isn't just about business. Also, all of these compounding effects are going to free up your resources, time, and your money. I'll just show you, this is just a visual representation of how we try to think of things from a business standpoint. So this bar chart, really when you look at this, the very top, at the top of the profit, that's really the total price that you can sell your goods or your services to your customer. And included in that price that you charge, you've got a cost component. You also have a certain amount of waste and you've got profit. So the idea here is let's shrink that middle section. Let's shrink that waste. And if you can shrink that waste, you'll drive more profit. You also need to measure it. First waste, overproduction. Overproduction is very simply producing more of a product than can be consumed or sold at the time. So this one is typically thought of as being the worst waste. It just consumes a huge amount of resources. It's typically finished goods. Now, I always chuckle because I have one client in particular, and we used to do their inventory count every year. So we would go out to their warehouse and we would count. This slide is very representative of their warehouse. There were boxes upon boxes of finished goods that they had produced that were just sitting there on the shelf, right? The thought being, well, if we build it, they will come. Well, no, they didn't. They were just goods. There were boxes upon boxes, and we had to count them every single year. And, they should probably just be discarded. The point here is the client was doing, I'll call it make work projects, right? You have this little bit of downtime when your people aren't necessarily 100% busy. So you decide, well, let's just build more product. Let's just keep going. And it's just a huge, it just really consumes your resources. Another great example is the food industry. So in the food industry, I read a stat that said that there's, was it 80 billion pounds of food get wasted in the US every year. 80 billion pounds. That's just tremendous. And they equate that to 1,000 Empire State Buildings worth of food every year. It's just huge. And you think about that, well, not all of that is going to be restaurants. A lot of that is just you and your life. But from a restaurant's point of view, that's a huge amount of stuff that you're just throwing away. And I really think back at McDonald's. So I think back, of course, I won't say how old I am, but when I look back at when I was a kid, I loved cheeseburgers. I could probably eat 7 or 8 in one sitting. I just loved the cheeseburgers. But I remember going to McDonald's and they always had them under that little heat lamp. But you think, at the end of the shift, the end of that day, how many burgers and fries did they just discard? Probably hundreds, thousands. McDonald's wide, millions. But really now when you go to McDonald's, you go and you fill in the made to order board, right? You enter exactly what you want. I want a burger. Yes, I want ketchup. No, I don't want onions. Yes, I want tomatoes. You customize your burger. You place your order and then you pay. McDonald's has basically solved their overproduction issue. Now, all the burgers are made to order, plus they're even paid for the burger before they even deliver it to the customer. They have really nailed this. So the way to think about that is they've created what's called a pull system. So they don't make anything until their customer has actually initiated the transaction. By doing that, they've freed up a ton of resources. So you think about what's the best use of your resources? Generate a bunch of inventory, or would you rather use your cash to buy new equipment, pay down debt? Maybe if you had a successful year, why don't you share some of that cash with your employees? As a shareholder, I would really like some dividends. Overproduction just ties up a huge amount of resources in your business. That's why they often think of it as being the worst waste. It also leads to the other wastes, as we'll see here. And overproduction is very easy to measure. Again, you're only going to manage what you measure. So if you want to manage overproduction, you can measure this easily just by looking at the amount of physical finished goods you have sitting on your shelf that your customers aren't buying. Very easy to see. The next waste is excess inventory. This is more thought of in terms of raw materials. So having more raw materials or information than you need at this point in time. So one thing I should mention here is, as we're talking about this, we often think, these 8 wastes came about in a manufacturing environment. And so they're more easily seen in that type of environment, but all of these wastes apply to a service-based industry as well. I'll give you lots of examples as well as how this applies to our firm. And I'll talk a little bit about our journey too, that we've taken along our lean path. And it's funny, you start down the lean path and you go a little ways and then you realize, oh my goodness, we have so much further to go. But anyway, I'll share some of those. But excess inventory, having more materials than you need. A good example of this in your personal life is, when's the last time you moved and you started taking boxes from whichever room in your house, in your closet, for example, or your storage room, and you find boxes that were still packed from the last time you moved? I would suggest you've got some excess inventory, and some of those things, do you really need them, or is it time to just get rid of them? That's what we're talking about here. The big push here was, if you remember, well, back when I was in college and university, the big buzzword was just-in-time inventory, JIT for short. And that was the whole idea, was, is there a way to get the inventory in our hands the second we need it? So we don't have to pay for it in advance. We don't have to incur a bunch of costs to store it, to handle it. Let's just have it come in on an as-needed basis. That was the whole point of just-in-time inventory. And really, when you think about all of these raw materials that are sitting on your shelf, the way I explain it to clients all the time is, really, you could take money out of your wallet and just have literally dollar bills sitting on your shelf, because you spent all of that cash and it's sitting in your warehouse somewhere and you haven't done anything with it. You have literally tied up dollar bills, $100 bills, $1,000 bills. What about bulk discounts? We often hear, your supplier will get in touch with you and say, hey, I'll tell you what, I've got a great deal for you. If you buy a year's worth of inventory, we'll discount it by 30%. Well, when that gets offered to you, really what's happening is your supplier has an excess inventory problem. They're trying to transfer it to you. We would really challenge that and say, it doesn't matter if you get a 30% discount. You shouldn't buy more inventory than you really need in a short period of time. We've seen so many times when clients will do this, and then for whatever reason, they change the way their business operates, or their customer demands change, and now they've got all this raw material inventory that they will never consume. They'll never use it. Seemed like a good deal at the time. Turns out just a huge waste. This is a company out of Edmonton, actually, Reacts, who helps businesses measure this. So they developed this software where they basically, you take your inventory management data, drop it into their software, and they can help you analyze how much materials you've got on stock that maybe shouldn't be there. So on that left-hand side, that left circle, what they're seeing is, somewhere between 25 and 65% of stock, materials, of inventory that customers have generally are sitting there as overstock. They're overstocked in 25 to 60% of their inventory. That's a huge amount. If you have $1 million of inventory, that's $600,000 potentially of inventory that just you don't need to have, because it represents more than one cycle worth of goods on hand. Huge savings to be had here. And again, it can definitely be measured. Next waste we'll talk about is over-processing. So this one, over-processing, is processing more materials or information than necessary. Okay. Many examples of this. One that I think of is packaging. Often we see packaging. I mean, we all like to order stuff from Amazon, but I don't know how many times I'll order something, come in a little box, and the item may be delicate in nature, so it's already wrapped in bubble wrap, it's already wrapped in styrofoam, and then they put that box in a bigger box, wrapped in bubble wrap again. And you think, well, couldn't you have just shipped the original smaller box? Did we really need to repackage it again? Am I willing to pay for that? I'd rather not pay for that. Maybe we can decrease the size of that box, then maybe the shipping cost can actually come down. Just a thought. Lots of examples of this in our office. So in a service environment, for example, we prepare year ends for our clients. We look at our clients' financial information and we help them generate financial statements and a tax return. So sometimes GST is one of the areas that we can tend to overwork. We have clients that have excellent bookkeepers and excellent accounting practices, and they're just not willing to pay for us to look into all of the details of their GST. Other clients, completely the opposite. They may have a weak bookkeeper or a weak set of procedures, and looking into their GST details may be very value added for them. So again, what is your customer willing to pay for? In our case, we need to be very specific about asking customer A versus customer B whether they're willing to pay for that. Here's another live example of waste in our office. Boy, this goes back probably 4 years ago now, 5 years ago. We had an Excel spreadsheet where basically every person in our office, all of our file preparers, would every Friday, they were required to create a listing of the jobs that they had on the go. So we wanted to know what our staff were working on. So A, what are you working on? B, how long is it going to take you? And C, are you stuck? Are there any obstacles for you to keep moving? The idea was if we knew what everyone was doing, the workload on everyone's plate, we could rebalance that workload if need be. So each staff member filled out this Excel spreadsheet, and then they would send it to Kelly, our lead admin person. Kelly would take these spreadsheets from all of the staff, consolidate them all into one master spreadsheet, and then on Monday morning, she would distribute this to the partners. Well, partners, our schedules are all over the map. We're out at a client, we have a meeting here, we're going for lunch. So by the time we would look at it, sometimes it's Tuesday, maybe Tuesday at lunch. Well, this information is just useless at that point. It's not live, it's not up to date, it's not relevant. So many things have changed. It's just useless. So we looked at different ways of solving this. This is just huge over processing. So we looked at, of course, there's lots of software. You can buy software to solve this, but software can get pretty expensive. Didn't really want to spend that kind of money. So what did we do? Ooh, a whiteboard. Really fancy, really fancy. Very simple though, very simple. What we did is said, well, why don't we have all of these jobs on sticky notes? And as they move through the office from the preparers to the reviewers to the partners, we just move the sticky. Very simple. We look at the dates when those jobs came in. We can track that, very visual. We can see how old the jobs are, how long they've been in the office. We can see who's overloaded, who can handle more work. It's very visual. We can explain this board to any new team member in about 2 minutes and they understand it. Over time, we've tweaked it. Now it looks more like this. More staff. We have everyone included on the board. We've changed the information that's on the sticky notes a little bit to capture things that we've wanted to capture. It has solved this problem. Tracking the jobs now happens in real time. It's very simple. And this actually sits in our lunchroom so everybody can see it. Another example of over processing is we did this exercise out at a client location, and this client was purchasing, this is their purchasing cycle. So raw materials being purchased, come in through shipping, and then from shipping, they go to be stored in the warehouse before they're consumed, and also following all the documentation from the time of order placement till the time the bill of lading comes in and the invoice comes in, tying all that together and physically paying the invoice. Sat down with the client, mapped this all out, and we did this with I think it was 4 or 5 people from the client location. And we asked them, all right, do we see any duplication here? Is there anything different we can do? And finally, one person stood up, took the red marker, and everywhere where you see those red slashes was where he said, we don't need to do this step. We don't need to do this. This is already being done over here on this step. Slash, slash, slash. Just a huge amount of over processing. At the end of the day, they were able to streamline that process and get to something that was much more, just much more effective. Just took a lot less time, makes everybody happier. Just makes everybody happier. Frees up your time to be able to do more value-added things. Next waste here is transportation. Transportation is exactly what you think it is. Moving inventory, people, tools, anything, more often over further distances than is necessary. Here you really think about location. Where are your suppliers located? Where are your customers located? And typically those are the two big things. Transportation can be very expensive. It can be very expensive to try to eliminate this or reduce it because you're typically talking about physical things that are not easily solved. If you have half your customers in Edmonton and the other half of your customers in Toronto, it isn't exactly easy to set up a second manufacturing operation in Toronto just to reduce the transportation waste. So, but there are some smaller things that you can think about. What about inside a warehouse? A warehouse is a great example. When you think about Amazon warehouses, any distribution warehouse, typically what you'll see is the high movement, high turnover items will be toward the front of the warehouse, right where the shipping is, because you don't want people, you don't want your order fillers and your forklifts to be going all the way to the back of the warehouse. You want them to fill using the items right at the front and fill those orders very quickly. And the low turnover items, the low moving stock, put those at the far back, and you're just going to need to access them less often. You know, I think back in the day, I grew up in a small town, and my dad was he was a carpenter, and we built houses. We did all kinds of construction projects. We did lots of different things, and Dad's tools were always in the truck. And of course, I was the gopher, so that was my job. You know, run for this tool, run for that tool. But also, he would give me projects. All right, my task for today was to work on X, Y, Z, and you know, lack of planning on my part, I would take a few tools with me, start the job, and then go, oh, geez, I forgot that at the back at the truck. Run back to the truck, get the tool, come all the way back, work a little bit. Oh, geez, I forgot that tool. Run back. Just huge waste. To prevent that, probably should have been more training. I imagine Dad probably should have trained me a little bit more, but sink or swim. But really, there are a ton of construction companies now that do this. They call them tailgate meetings, where they sit down and they really look at, well, what's needed for today, and let's make sure we have everything we need, so we don't have to run back and forth to the shop, back and forth to the truck. Let's get everything that we need to be ready to go for today to minimize that transportation waste. Also, one big thing you'll see here as we talk is, as you work on reducing these wastes, you often see that safety. You'll often see that tailgate meetings is not just to make sure we have everything we need and we know what we're doing for the day, but also let's think about what are the safety items that we should think about. So you'll just see an improvement in communication typically, and that communication will help to resolve some of those safety matters. Another transportation reduction idea is service vehicles. You'll often see this in mechanical, plumbing, electrical, right? They always have their service trucks, and their service trucks typically contain the most common materials and common replacement parts, right? The idea is, well, now they don't have to run back to the shop to get those items. Now you really have to balance this, because now what you've done is you've moved some inventory into your service vehicle. So do you have an excess inventory problem? So really, with a lot of these wastes, you have to be careful. You may solve your transportation waste, but create another waste over here. Just things to think about. You really have to balance these. Motion waste. Motion waste is really, I think about this in terms of how you do the work. more the details about how. So are there intricate motions involved in what you do? I like this picture. Probably going to be a little bit of motion waste with this fellow with this little saw. There's probably a better way. Maybe there's a different tool he could use. Maybe there's a different technique, different approach. It's really about how you do things. There are many, many examples in the Japanese manufacturing realm. So I've read stories and heard of, of companies where you'll have a very technical piece that must be done. So an employee might have his supplies here. He takes the good and he has to screw a couple things in, you know, tweak this, tweak that, move it over there, add another component, and it goes off to the side. And he repeats this process time after time. And in some of these environments in Japan, the training will be, it's astronomical. It's something like 3 months of training where somebody just watches this one individual and shows him exactly how to do something. Put this back there, move it there, very intricate steps. And this person is not allowed to work on their own until they've mastered these small motions, just to reduce the waste because of these high repetitive types of environments. So workspace design really comes to mind. These are some of the causes. I won't get into all of these, but really it's laying out your workspace. Having a nice clean workspace is really what comes to mind here. This is often where you'll hear 5S. Maybe some of you have heard of 5S. 5S is a lean technique, and it's you know, sort. You sort what you have, you straighten it out, get everything set out the way you want it. You sweep, shine, you clean things up, you standardize it such that all of your similar cells, your similar workstations will be all laid out in the same fashion, and then you sustain it. So what's your process for making sure that you don't then deviate from that? And again, we see this all the time. I can't see what all of your workspaces look like, but I know mine has definitely some improvements I can make. I've tidied up for you back here to make it look nice and clean. But it's really about, do you need to have clutter? Reduce your clutter. If you're in a manufacturing environment, well, where are your tools? You see often these cutouts. You'll see some shops that will have these cutouts where, you know, the hammer goes here, the screwdriver goes here, the pliers go here. And the idea is put them back every time so you're not running around. This is an example of our office actually back in our old location, where when we started moving toward electronic files, we get a lot of information from our clients that's paper. Still do a lot of stuff by paper. That's the input of our process. Clients give us paper. We wanted to digitize those papers as much as possible. So we had 2 big photocopiers in our office, and that's where we did all the scanning. So you'd scan and it would email you the electronic copy. And, you know, so we sort of tracked this, people running all over the office. And we decided, you know, for the cost of a scanner, why don't we just get everyone a small portable scanner that they can have on their desk? And, you know, when you have those large scan jobs, fine, you go to the big copier. But for every other purpose, it's just so much more efficient. So this is just a representative picture of what that looks like in terms of reducing the motion waste of people running around the office all the time. Here's another example of, this is actually my business partner, Bob, his house. He lives in an old farmhouse back in his family homestead just out of Edmonton here. And it's a traditional house, and it's built with many, many small, tiny little closets, but there's many of them. And he just got tired of running around from one closet to another in his house to get ready every day. He finally hired California Closets and said, I'm done with this. Got one nice big closet. He reduced the time it takes to get him ready in the morning. And I mean, we're talking about small things here in this particular case, but you know, if it frees up a few minutes every morning, that's great. Maybe that's time for you to actually eat a good breakfast or to get to work and not feel stressed. So some of these things are just little, but they still just make you happier, like we said. Defects. defects can really, affect your reputation. Defects, very obvious, errors and mistakes. Anything that causes a rework. When you think about these companies, what did it cost Volkswagen to correct all those emission problems, right? Just a huge, huge cost to them. Massive waste just because of those defects. The big thing to remember with defects too is it often leads to other wastes. So if you find that you've got a defect, well, then you need to fix it. Well, if you're fixing it, that's probably over processing, right? So now you've got over processing. Sometimes if you find a defect, it can lead to excess inventory or overproduction, because you can have a bunch of goods and finished goods that have all these defects. Well, now they're just sitting there. Nobody's going to buy them. So defects can be quite bad. And again, it's a reputational problem, right? What happens when you think of Tesla? What are your thoughts in terms of quality, in terms of defects? Maybe good, except for the odd person that gets run over by a driverless vehicle. But aside from that, you would expect a high quality and a low level of defects. In our office, again, a service type of setting, there are always defects. So our financial statements, in some cases, when they come through our process and they go through the review stage and they come to me for approval, defects can be just a killer. Our products have a low tolerance for defects. We have to make sure that we give that out to our clients in a very defect-free way. Again, it's reputation and what are you willing to stand for? You think of Gordon Ramsay, he has a very low tolerance for defects. What about in a lab setting? Again, very low tolerance for defects. This is really where you start getting into how much defects are you willing to accept. So for example, is 99.9%, is that good enough? Or do you want to strive for something even better? So I just did a quick calculation. If you think about the power grid, so let's say you're involved with power generation, power distribution. If you say, well, I'm happy with 99.9% effectiveness, okay, well, that 0.1% downtime, that would mean 43 minutes per month of no power. Well, we would all throw our hands up in the air and say, this is ridiculous. We're not going to stand for that. So 99.9% probably isn't good enough. Again, depending on your business, depending on what you're doing. This is where the concept of Six Sigma comes into play. Some of you may have heard of this, Six Sigma. Six Sigma is a statistical number. We're not going to get into the detail here, but what it means is when you think of the bell curve and where your defects are as your outliers, and the idea is you want to accept no more than 3 defects per million. That's Six Sigma mathematically gets you to 3 defects per million at maximum. We're not going to jump into that. That's beyond the scope here. Next waste is waiting waste. Exactly what you think it is. Waiting for materials, waiting for information, customers, patients. The obvious one, right? We all wait at the doctor. We wait at the dentist. Lots of waiting waste. Again, it's a very reputational problem. Here's an example in our office. Of course, we get information from clients, right? So the information comes in on any given day. And as we work through that information, first it sits a little bit. That's that first little red bar on the left. And then we start working on it. We get partway through it. And then we find, we've got questions for the client. We submit those questions for the client. And then we wait a period of time. We get some answers from the client, work on it again. And then we say, we have a few more questions. So we send it to the client again. Comes back. We work on it a bit more. And then we put it in for a review. And then it sits on a manager's desk for a little bit. So we end up with all these little spurts of time when we're actually working on it. So at the end of the day, maybe we put in 20 hours of value-added work. Well, what's actually happened, it may have taken us 60 days from start to finish to actually get that item out to our client. It's just a tremendous amount of waiting waste. And we're doing things to try to reduce that, to improve the turnover. Some of these things are the cause may not necessarily be us, but we still need to do what we can to reduce that waiting waste. And I'm just really happy this is not drawn to scale, because it would be absolutely embarrassing to see the huge amount of red and these little slivers of blue where there's actually value-added work being done. So in our office, what we've done is created this sheet where we provide these sheets to our clients at the start of their file before they give us the information. And we outline, client, we would really like for you to give us these 7 or 8 or 10 things. And these are very specific to you and your file. And right under the contact information, I'm not sure if you can see that, but there's a section right under that says the following items are required before we begin working on your file. The idea is we're really encouraging the client, if you can please give us everything that we're asking for up front, boy, we could really be much more efficient in terms of reducing that waiting waste. And the last waste is talent or unutilized talent. You've got a team. You have a team. Hopefully, you're not working 100% on your own. Well, maybe you are if you're in a startup type of environment. But even if you are, you likely have a group of advisors. You've got family. You've got other people around you. Never be shy about tapping into that pool. It's really a bottomless or an endless supply of ideas. There's limitless potential, right, in terms of what can come from engaging your group. Here's a visual of the 8 wastes, and just a way for you to remember these. Sometimes people will think about it in terms of downtime. Sometimes you'll think about it in terms of Tim Woods. So the idea is Tim Woods, well, maybe he's this employee, this person who's part of your group, and he does nothing but cost you money, cost you time and money. He's taking up your resources. So Tim Woods is causing the downtime. Just a couple ways to remember it really quickly. You can Google this, it's all over the internet. I'm not sure if you've seen the movie The Founder, the McDonald's story, but there's a great clip in there. Yeah, exactly. Thumbs up. This is fantastic, especially that clip when they're all out on the tennis court and they've drawn out with their rulers and their chalk, outlining their new kitchen and thinking about how can we move things around to make this more efficient. And they run through a scenario with their actual people there pretending to make burgers, and they go, no, this isn't really working. Let's redo it. And they redo it and they redo it, trial and error. If you haven't seen it, definitely see that, especially that one clip. So again, when we go back to this is what we were looking at in terms of profit, waste, and cost, and the price you can charge your customer. Well, what if we could reduce the waste? We're going to have more profit, plain and simple. We just will. And at the end of the day, we can still charge our customer the same price, right? And that becomes especially important in today's economy where you're fighting for every dollar. Now, maybe this even allows you to sell your item or provide your service at even a lower price to your customer, and you can still potentially have more profit, or maybe just the same profit you had before, but you're doing it more efficiently. It's all about cutting out that waste. Again, just a few pictures here. This is sort of the traditional accounting way of looking at this, and profit, margin. You still need to do some of these things to satisfy your banking requirements or to file your tax return. You still need to do that. But maybe from an internal standpoint, maybe you do want to physically show what is my cost, what is my waste, and what's my profit from a management accounting standpoint, right? And then there's other models. Maybe you should actually look at valuing, well, let's measure the value to the customer first. What are they willing to pay? And then work backward from there. Just a different way of looking at things. Accounting is a very traditional, obviously a very traditional profession. So we need to be more creative in how we measure those things. So just going to end off here, just watching the time, being cognizant. I want to leave some time for your questions. The idea here, so where do I start? Let's arm you with what you need to get going. Usually what I find when we really sit down and start talking with our clients, usually there's 2 or 3 ways that really apply to a specific client's business. It's just, obviously all the 8 wastes are there, but there's often a couple that are just right. There's a couple when you really ask the business owner, what bothers you? What keeps you up at night? What do you really hate? It's the whole concept of fix what bugs you. That's one thing you'll often hear in the lean circles is fix what bugs you. Address the things that you really don't like doing. If you don't like doing it, there's probably a reason, probably inefficient. There's things you can do to reduce this, to reduce the waste, to cut out the waste. Really, the important thing here, though, is to build a lean culture. So, I'm not sure where all of you are at on your entrepreneurial journey. Some of you may have companies already, or if you're looking at starting a company. But this is a great opportunity if you're early in your corporate journey. You can build lean right away on day one. And in fact, if you're looking at starting something new and maybe you don't have a lot of cash, that's a good thing. I would view that as an opportunity to say, this is great. Now you have a constraint. When you have a constraint, you have to find creative ways to get around that constraint. So I would really view that as an advantage versus a company that's been around for a long time, accounting like us. We've been doing things the same way for 100 years, 200 years. It's very difficult to break people's trains of thought. We've always done it that way. Well, it's time to move past that. So build that lean culture and really focus on continuous improvement. Small changes every day create that compounding effect. And experiment fearlessly. You can't look at a failure as, wow, we shouldn't have done that. You really have to say every failure is just an opportunity to have learned something. I really encourage that. We really started down this path probably 10 years ago. We started with some low-hanging fruit. We talked to our staff about, is there anything in your environment that you don't like? So, well, it was a little bit cumbersome. They didn't quite have the right equipment. All right, so now we started adding monitors. We went to the dual monitors, we went to the triple monitors. Anything else that they didn't like about their environment? Anything else specific? And, we made a little bit of headway, but really now we're starting to gain some traction because we've really started developing this lean culture. And we started with these morning meetings. Again, this is something from the Paul Akers 2-Second Lean book, where we have a morning stand-up meeting for 15 minutes every day with our group. And we talk about these things and we say, okay, what challenges do you have? Give us a fix what bugs you. Tell me what's bothering you and let's try to correct it. You don't have to have the solution, but what is something about your job that you don't enjoy or that you find challenging or that you find is ridiculous? We always have a defect with this, too much processing with that. And we tackle these things immediately in our morning meetings. We don't say, okay, well, let's get everyone together and have a big staff meeting in a week from now and coordinate schedules. No. We deal with these issues immediately. Let's change the way we're doing things right now. So when we go back to our desks, we're doing it differently. We just don't spend a lot of time creating more meetings. Fix it on the fly and move forward. What's the worst that can happen? Worst that can happen is, well, that didn't work. Okay, you go back to doing it the way you were doing it tomorrow, but you'll learn. Every time you do this, you'll learn a little nugget. That's the key here is try it. Just give it a shot. Really, that's what I had for you today. Well, a couple of things. First, before we do the Q&A, I just really want to say thank you for everyone who attended. And I really want to thank you, Cecile, for setting this up. Thank you to Nate and the Maji Entrepreneur Center. This is, I'm just more than happy to present to anybody who's willing to listen about lean and the 8 wastes, because we really want to get the message out. This is a thing that's really, these are concepts that are really gaining traction. And the more everyone understands them, I just feel like, especially here in Alberta, we're in a very technologically friendly city. I think we're on the cusp of some really cool things happening. And the more that people understand these lean concepts, the better. So just a huge thank you. And I think we'll open it up for some Q&A here. So maybe I'll stop sharing my screen so then I can scroll through maybe some of the Q&A that's there.
Sounds good. So if you don't feel comfortable asking your question, you can put it in the chat, but otherwise, turn your camera on and ask away.
Hi.
Hi.
It's Dawn here. Thank you for that.
Dawn.
I don't really know how to turn on my camera using this. Is it the start
If
video?
you can't, don't worry about it.
Yes, thank you for that. I really enjoyed the presentation. My favorite things were the visuals and how you kind of portrayed how focusing on reducing waste can increase your profits, but the visual really helped see that. And the 5 S's. I do have a question. How do you feel about the 80-20 rule about trying to find defects? As you mentioned something about defining what's acceptable and the percentages. I've always kind of resorted to the 80-20 rule because of kind of theories around that. What are your thoughts on that?
100%. I completely agree. So I think maybe let's just separate the two things. In terms of defects, I think, well, let's go back a second. The 80-20 rule in my mind is fantastic, and that's a great starting point. Just start hitting those big things that bug you. Focus your time on those key things that you feel are going to reduce waste in your business. As you do that, you're going to typically find that you'll have fewer defects. So in terms of tying those two concepts together, you'll see a reduction in your defects by implementing the 80-20 rule in almost everything that you do. That's just an efficient use of resources in my mind. So absolutely, 80-20 rule is a great way to look at these things. And it allows you to hit that low-lying fruit, right? You address those easy to solve problems first. Get the biggest bang for your buck.
Okay, Hanan has a question. Hanan? Did you have a question? You put your hand up. They keep going from mute to unmute. Maybe their mic is not working. You can put it in the chat. We can read it out. Okay, it's coming.
You bet. While we wait for that question to come, I'll just throw out one thing here. By all means, if you want to start down this journey with your team or your group, the morning meeting in my mind is probably the #1 place to start. So the morning meeting is just a quick 15 minutes, doesn't have to be long. Talk about your challenges, and the key here is that there's always an education component to your morning meeting. So when we really went down this journey, the education piece was really key. We had to introduce these lean concepts to our staff. We had to introduce them to these 8 wastes, to the Toyota production system, to what does it mean? What do all these things mean? What is 2-second lean? What are the 5 S's? What are we really looking to accomplish? And once we started down that path and doing the morning meetings, that was a game changer. All of a sudden, it opened up discussion. And one of the biggest wins that we've found is communication. The communication in our office has improved. Just I can't even tell you how poor our communication was in the past compared to how it is now. Just in terms of sharing our wins, sharing our challenges, we're just a much more open office.
There's nothing there. So if anybody else has a question, please. Wanted to know if you can access the recording after the meeting. I will have the recording, yes.
So just a couple other things I'll mention. One of the key things as well about lean is visual clues. So you'll notice when we had our whiteboard with all of those stickies on it, the idea there is to make it very visual so people can see it. One thing you can't quite see down in the bottom of my shelves down there, I actually have spots for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. The idea is when people bring files into my office for review, they're supposed to put the file on tomorrow's spot. So by the end of the day tomorrow, I need to go through that stack, so that I'm trying to minimize the waiting time, trying to minimize that so that things don't sit in my office for any more than 24 hours. You know, it's difficult, it's not always easy to do, and I slip up every now and again, but at least there's a visual clue there. So visual things are very, very important in a lean environment. Again, it's hard to measure things, it's hard to have reminders when you don't have those visual clues. So again, that's another key thing about lean.
Just a note from Katie, she had to hop out, but she wanted to thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Hi, just a couple of comments. I really appreciated the presentation. A lot of what you talked about reminded me about a lot of the waste that I noticed in my previous workplace. And hopefully they maybe have seen a presentation similar to this and be able to apply some of the concepts. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. And you know, it's funny you say that, because we kind of laugh here in our office. We say, once you learn to see the waste and you sort of have this filter, you can't unsee it. You know, you go to the airport, you go to just various places, and you see the waste. You see people walking around doing nothing. You know, I get to see some construction looking out of my windows here in some of the downtown areas, and I don't want to knock the construction guys. That's not my intent. But you know, you all have the traditional visual in your mind of maybe 4 or 5 guys standing around with a shovel, right? It might be a little bit of waste there. So you can't unsee it now that you know about it.
Hanan got the question in. I'm just not quite sure. Due to COVID-19, it says, due to COVID-19, which globally most companies has been affected by how they control the waste due to shortages of inventories? I'm not sure how that, I kind of need some clarification, because I'm wondering if he's asking, if you know companies that or have there been a lot of companies affected by shortages of inventories, creating more waste?
Yeah, that's possible. You could have a shortage of inventory. In my mind, if there's a shortage of inventory, it's not necessarily going to lead to a waste. Certainly a business challenge if you're not able to obtain inventory as you need it. I would say that particular item is not something I've been hearing from my client base anyway, that there's been a shortage of inventory. That's not what I'm hearing from my clients anyway. That's just me.
Unless it's toilet paper?
Exactly. And apparently that's still going on. Unbelievable.
I don't get it.
Right.
Okay, well, if there's no further questions, I just want to make sure that we take a second here to thank Richard for his time and sharing his knowledge. Really, really appreciate it. We can't help our students without business professionals like yourself getting involved and giving of your knowledge and your time. So really, really appreciate you doing your presentation today. And everybody, we'll start again with sessions in January with our keynote with Kimberly Allison and Marketing RX, focused on mental health and social media. So really important topic as well. Have a great day. And I will be sending out a short survey just to get your feedback.
Fantastic. And I'm always looking to improve. So please, more feedback, the better.
Okay. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.